Good morning, everyone. I am Aaron Blumberg, Swiftland's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to E is for Everyone, Ensuring Your E-Resources Are Accessible to All, Part 1. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Dr. Stephanie Rollins. Dr. Rollins is the Chief of Information Services at Muir S. Fairchild Research Information Center. She is also an adjunct digital reference professor for the University of Alabama. Stephanie serves on both regional and state library committees and has over 22 years of experience in academic and special libraries. She holds a bachelor's in English from Auburn University, a master's degree in library service, and a doctorate in public administration, both from the University of Alabama. Please welcome Dr. Rollins and enjoy her webinar this morning. Dr. Rollins?
Thank you so much, Aaron. Welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to talk to you today about making your electronic resources accessible for your patrons. This is kind of a beginner type session, just some basic things to help you get started. It's not super technical, so I'm hoping that that's something that will appeal to everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about what disability is, kind of frame the issue, why it's so important, which I'm sure that you guys all know, but just kind of a refresher on that, a little bit about libraries and the law, and then we'll focus a little bit on some simple things that you can do to check your electronic resources to make sure that they are accessible. So first up, what do we consider to be a disability? Well, if you look at the federal law, a disability is defined as a person with any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. So this includes things like hearing, mobility, visual impairment, chronic alcoholism, mental illness, AIDS-related complex, and mental retardation that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And when they talk about major life activities, this considers things like walking, talking, hearing, seeing, breathing, learning, performing manual tasks, and caring for oneself. So kind of a really broad definition. There's still some kind of gray areas within this. So if you're trying to help somebody who needs to get services or different things like that within your library, they're looking for social services, or they're a caregiver or a parent of someone, this kind of helps you just kind of establish what is considered a disability. Specifically, if you look further at the law, you can go to the Social Security Administration, and this gives you Part A of the Social Security adult listings, and that can give you even more specific definitions. So as in terms of services, what does a disability include for adults? What does it include for children? What's considered someone who can actually receive disability benefits? So why should we focus on accessibility in libraries? And kind of our Bible, our guru group that guides all of us, the American Library Association, actually has a service policy for people with disabilities, and this was established in 2001. And they feel like, and I feel too, and I don't think it's on purpose. I just think we're so used to living our lives, and we don't often think of other people. Not that you guys wouldn't, but I just think that population in general just kind of goes on their merry way, not thinking about things because it doesn't affect them if they don't have a disability. But everybody is one step away from disability, whether you're getting older, maybe you have to become a caregiver, maybe your child. You just never know. And so it's always good to know kind of what ALA thinks and what the government thinks about what's considered a disability and what services can be provided. So again, we play a huge role in people's life. We're a gateway to people with disabilities, all people. We can help them participate in society. They can get the information they need. So ALA says that we should use principles of universal design, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And in this policy, they use the word must, and must means mandated by law and or within AALA's control, and should mean it's strongly recommended, and libraries should make every effort to. Now, if you're an old building, for instance, sometimes you cannot redo the entire building, but you can make upgrades to the building. But however, if you're building a brand new building, you need to think about things in terms of universal design, which is design that helps all people. Okay, so when you look at ALA's policy, they talk about the scope of disability law, and we'll get a little bit more into this later. We'll talk a little bit more about the law. But they look at Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the ADA of 1990, and Title I and Title II. And Title I talks about employment, and Title II talks about government programs and services, and of course, Title III, public accommodations, libraries, definitely. Um, so what do they talk about when they think about library services? We must not discriminate against individuals with disabilities, and we need to make sure that they have equal access to library resources. So some of the things that we can do for that is extended loan periods, waived late fines, extended reserve, library cards for proxies, books by mail, reference services by fax or mail, home delivery, remote access to the OPAC, which is pretty common now anyways, remote access to library resources, volunteer readers, real-time captioning, somebody like Deb that might do ASL, American Sign Language, and libraries should also think about including participants with disabilities in the planning, the implementation, and evaluation of library services, programs, and facilities. So thinking about, well, let's have this great new iPad with all these apps on it. Well, you might first want to consult somebody with a disability to make sure the apps on the iPad are actually going to work for them. I guess I would say just don't assume the technology and the services you're going to plan are going to work unless you ask somebody with a disability or you include them in the planning process to begin with. So those are some things to think about. Probably the most common focus on people with disabilities are the facilities. That's a huge barrier. If people can't actually get into your library because of an architectural barrier, it's something that you need to consider removing. For instance, if you have, say, a little elevator that's at your front door, and I remember when I was in library school, our library had a little elevator, it had steps, but it had like a little elevator that helped you get down the steps. Well, if that was broken, somebody in a wheelchair couldn't access the library. So maybe, something more old school like a ramp, might have been a better idea. Anyway, so thinking about, how can you make your libraries accessible architecturally, and that's kind of, what most people focus on as far as making libraries accessible to patrons with disabilities. That's the highest, legal things that you see a lot of times, not necessarily computers and things like that, although those do happen, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And libraries should try to adapt their facilities, again, if it can carry it out without too much difficulty or expense. Like you can't redo your whole library just to put in a ramp. But maybe there's something else you can do that would help people access your libraries. Um, our collections, this is what's most important to me as far as, collections and technology are probably my two most importance because the way things are today, a lot of people may or may not come to your facility. So the only point of contact they have with you may be your collection or the technology that you provide on your website. So we need to find a way to reasonably accommodate people with the collections. For instance, if you have an ebook, does it have a text-to-speech function or is it strictly text? That's going to really limit your ability to have that person with a disability connect to your collection. Also, for instance, technology. Eventually, using accessible and universal design so you can convey the information on your website, or if you have a streaming video, chat, or program that you present. You need to think about the broad range of disabilities, learning, mobility, developmental, but also, people that are blind. So, again, if you should have someone who has a disability on a committee with you or you are able to consult with them, that's only going to make your collections and your technology more usable to everyone that has a disability. And it also helps with things like today that you're coming to. If you can become aware of how technologies can hinder or how technologies can help people with disabilities, that helps you to assist all users with library technology, not just patrons, because a lot of the things that we talk about are inevitably going to help your website or your library technology become even more usable to everybody, not just people with disabilities. Although that's what we're talking about today. So ALA also focuses on employment. Think about your libraries and how many libraries have people with disabilities working for them. I don't think it's a representative population. I do know there's a lot of people with hidden disabilities that don't disclose. Maybe they have a slight hearing deficit or a vision issue that they don't disclose. So it could be that there's somebody with a disability working in your library. But I don't find it representative. So consider hiring people with disabilities, within the profession, I would say. I think that's a great idea. Um, Also, graduate programs should have require students to learn about accessibility issues. I just wanted to ask you to learning disabilities too. Yes, absolutely. I wanted to ask you if you would just type in the chat box really quickly if you had any kind of session or course on patrons with disabilities in your library school program. You just type yes or no. Oh, that's fantastic. Elizabeth, when did you graduate? I'm just wondering if it's a current thing or if it's something that's gone on for a while. 19, wow, okay. I'm just watching the chat box. I did not. I graduated in 1995, and I did not have anything. I actually did a presentation on the National Library Service for my class as part of our very first class, but that's just something that I was interested in. So I don't know how consistent graduate schools are. The students I teach now, I think they do get something, but we did not. So if if you or your staff don't, or if you have new librarians that haven't had any kind of training on this, please share what you learned in your graduate program because it's only going to help them, again, not work with just people with disabilities, but all people to realize that, everybody might need a little bit of extra help sometimes. Of course, ALA makes their conferences and their publications and communications. They try to do things to make those more readily available to patrons with disabilities. So again, why should we focus on accessibility in libraries? And this is just more of kind of a data point overview just to kind of show you how many people are there in the world with accessibility issues. And in 2015, um, it says there were 316,450,569 individuals living in the community, and it said 39,906,328 which is about 12.6%, are individuals with disabilities. And in a minute, I'll show you kind of what it looks like for Florida. And again, these statistics are a little bit behind because they're based on the census and a couple other things that take some time to gather, but I think it's probably even more today. And you can see that California has the largest, Wyoming is the smallest, but again, look at the difference in the number of people in the state. Um, so hearing disability, 28.1%, vision disability, 18.3%, um, cognitive disability, which someone earlier had mentioned, learning disability, 49.1%. And this is of the total, 39 million. Ambulatory disability, I mean, you can't move, could be cerebral palsy, could be, just you're older and you have trouble moving, 52.4%. People that have a self-care disability, 20%. People who can't live independently on their own, 36.3%. So this is what it looks like for Florida, and this is from the disabilitystatistics.org. And another thing I would say, whether you're looking at collections, facilities, technology, you want to look at the data for your community and see, kind of what issues, what types of disabilities are most prevalent in your community, and that can also help you plan as far as your collections and your technology. So this is from 2005, I'm sorry, 2015. And you can see it kind of mirrors a little bit of the American Community Survey, but Florida actually has 13.3% of all of its population, all ages, with a disability. This breaks it down by age, so you can see the majority of people are over the age 75, but not necessarily everyone. 65, 75, you can see the statistics there. And these are the 6 types of disability that were reported in Florida. So 2.4 visual, 3.8 hearing, 7.6 ambulatory, 5.1 cognitive, 2.8 self-care, and 5.8 independent living disability. And this is just the first page of this report. And you can go to this link here and you can run your own report. And it also gives you some information about employment, race, looking for work. So some really good statistics on specifically to Florida. Also, if you go to, I believe it's the Census Bureau, I can send you the link if you want. You can actually go to your county. I think it's American Fact Finder. I might mention it later, maybe getting ahead of myself. But you can actually go to your specific county and get the numbers on people with disabilities to kind of see who is in your community, who's in your counties beside you that might actually kind of come to your library, even if they don't have a library card. What kind of disabilities are in your exact community. The other thing is, as far as accessibility in libraries, people want to know. There's a Pew study that was done in 2011, and people want to know about disabilities. They look up health topics. They look up information on their specific disability, and this is about 59% of all adults. They also watch an online video. They look at reviews of drugs and medical treatments. People who have severe disability, this is the kind of information that they're looking for, so that's why I bring it up. So that we can definitely have a role in helping them find their best, healthcare options, and they are looking. So we need to focus on accessibility and being able to provide that information to them. So how can we provide accessible library services? The first thing I talked about is kind of knowing the community. What are they looking for? That's a little bit harder to kind of figure out, but if you find out that there's an overwhelming number of people in your community that have cancer, you may want to have some information on cancer, that kind of thing. What kind of resources can you use to help them, whether it's social services, whether it's a book, whether it's a program that you can provide. Those are all things to think about. Evaluating what you have, evaluating your websites, evaluating your technology, and then communicating and instructing your users on how to use it. If they only come to you online and that's the only way they use you, how are you going to be there where they are and they have a disability? How are you going to instruct them on how to use the library? And we'll talk a little bit about that too. Again, the health literacy aspect of it, sometimes they do need that information, so educating them on how to find effective health information that deals with their disability. And then also, there's ethical and legal issues that you need to think about. You don't want to determine for someone that they have a disability, but you want to help them find the information that they need to help them get services or whatever it might be. So here's the American Fact Finder, and then also the community health assessment that I was talking about that'll help you kind of get a picture of your community. And if you understand disability and other demographic characteristics of the community, it can only help you to develop better services, and it's based on who is in your community. And so the CHNA requires creating a free account, but it's pretty easy to use. And I just like the aspect of you can kind of get a picture of your community without having to do an extensive survey, which they're great. It's just getting people to fill those out, not so great. So it kind of gives you a picture of who's in your community and what kind of disabilities they have. Okay, so what does web accessibility mean? We're going to switch a little bit as opposed to kind of services and look a little bit more about what do we mean by web accessibility. And if you want to, as we go along, if I ask questions, please feel free to type in the chat box because I always get something from that I didn't get before. So what does it mean when we talk about web accessibility? Booby proofing your website. I like that. That's great, Elizabeth. Absolutely. One of the things I would say, yes, ability for patrons to access the internet. Great, Joyce. I would say web accessibility is something that is essential to design, not an added feature. And sometimes it is an added feature because you've built this beautiful website and then you look at it, you're like, oh, yep, I need to go back and fix it for people with disabilities. People just assume that everything's great. They don't test things. They don't have someone with a disability test it. Different things like that. So, but it's supposed to be essential to design. To design. Again, the site is clear, logically organized. And again, it's included from the beginning, like I said, not an after fix, you would hope. It's something that works with screen readers, refreshable braille, without a mouse, which you don't often think of, and the website is able to respond with visual cues or audio. So again, people can talk to, next tab on with their screen reader, their software, and it will click on the link. It will do that for them. And that's built into a lot of times to the screen reader software. So you don't always have to worry about that. And they've come a long way with that, believe me. And again, all users, regardless of ability, are able to use, navigate, and perceive the web content. So some fabulous answers there, and I just added a little bit more to that. And then if you didn't know, there is an Institute on Disability, and this is called Inclusion 2.0, achieving inclusion through crafting accessible online experiences. Say that fast. So it talks about web accessibility, and it's something this is put out by the University of New Hampshire. And this just talks about what web accessibility is a little bit more, why it's important, and we'll talk a little bit more about they talk about perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. What's an example of that? But perceivable means that it's presentable to users. They can perceive it. Operable basically means they can navigate it. Understandable, is that a word? I guess that's a word. Um, Information and the operation of user interface must be understandable. That must be able to understand the information as well as the operation. So, whereas operable is just being able to operate it, understand means you can understand and operate it. And then robust, again, it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, so including assistive technology. So that means like screen readers and things like that. And this guy here is the guy who invented the World Wide Web. He looks young, doesn't he? So this is Tim Berners-Lee, and he says the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So in case we didn't already know that, he said it. That's a quote. That's something that you guys can use. So when we talk about the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, I just kind of wanted to give you an example because reading that you're like, okay, what is that? What's an example? I always need an example. I don't know about you guys. So this is the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative, and it's kind of came about because of the guy that was on the screen before this, Tim, and it talks about who benefits from this type of accessibility initiative. And these are also people that write the guidelines for web pages and different things like that, and we'll get to that in a minute. So who benefits? Basically anybody with a disability, and I think everybody benefits when you look at these different aspects. So, technology is our medium, and we make assumptions about accessibility. I've said that a couple of times already. But on the other hand, technology comes out so fast, it's often overlooked. Oh, well, here's a new Flash thing that does blah, blah, blah. Well, screen reader sometimes can't, and I don't think understands Flash. So if your entire website is Flash, your entire website is unusable to somebody with a disability. Anyways, but to talk about a couple of things about what these mean, just to give you examples. So when we talk about perceivable, this is simple. This is things like text alternatives to images or captions for multimedia. The content is presented in different ways. And for example, just recently I was on the Penny's website on my phone, and I looked down at the bottom and it said, and I was shopping for something, and it said low vision or low vision or disability version. And I clicked on it, and all it did is it took out all the images. And it gave you it was super clean, super easy to use. So even somebody without a disability might appeal to. But and it kind of described the pictures a little bit. I thought it was really neat. So if you have a chance to go to Penny's and look at that, that might be something worth looking at. So Again, it's kind of neat to think about, in terms of accessibility for all. So operable. Operable is something, for instance, it can function from a keyboard instead of a mouse. People have enough time to read and use the content. So things like scrolling or flashing are not great. Flashing is not great because that can cause seizures for some people who have autism and different things like that. And operable means you help users find information. So you have a kind of a, it's easy to tell, the way what things are called. It's easy for them to find things. So understandable. Sorry. Um, so text readable. The text is readable. Understandable and predictable. So on each page, like if you click on home, you're going to go home. You're not going to go somewhere else. And it also helps, understandable means it helps users avoid mistakes, or it can help them correct mistakes. So, if you didn't, for instance, how Google helps you correct mistakes if you spell something incorrectly, that kind of thing. Robust, again, that talks about compatibility with current and future tools, like refreshable braille. Somebody with a headset that can't use a keyboard or a mouse, but they can talk or use their eyes to track, to click on. Is it something that's going to work with that? So just very quickly, I want to share with you a couple of sites, and of course these are the worst examples, just to kind of show you what not to do when you build a website, and you could Google and find just about a ton of these. So, oh, Elizabeth has a question. What can we do if user reads better white on black versus black on white, and we cannot change this on the computer? I'll have to look into that. I thought there was a way to do that. I know you can do it on your iPhone. I'm not sure about the computer, but I thought there was a setting to do that. But let me follow up on that for you and make sure I'm not wrong about that. Okay, so I just want to share you a couple websites, and this will be very quick. Okay, so this is the Wisconsin Bottle Shop. Let me go back to the main site, sorry. So this is the second site. Let me see. It takes me back to and I think they've actually taken to heart a lot of the feedback they got on this site. Because let me see if I can pull the chat up in case you guys are saying something. Um, Before it was just a collection of bottles and there was nothing you can click on, but now look, they've got some alternate texts if you put it on the right spot. But if you're doing a screen reader, I'm not sure what this is going to pick up, if it's going to be helpful or not. This one is just crazy, and I don't know if somebody did this on purpose. This is Yvette's bridal site. Look at this. I don't even know where a screen reader would start or anything like that. And then this one, remember I was talking about Flash, this is the Penny Juice site. Okay, well, nothing's going to work because you have to have a Flash player. If we click on HTML, let's see what happens. And it's just an image, and there's no alternate text. Okay, so I just want to give you a couple examples, and I know that you've got a bunch that you've seen yourself, so don't do that. So I'm going to stop sharing just 1 second. I'll go back to you. I just wanted to give you a couple examples of what not to do. Get back to this. Just 1 second. Okay. Okay, so again, I told you in the beginning we talk a little bit about accessibility versus universal design, and just kind of the difference in case, because I get confused sometimes and I have to go look it up again, because I think about universal making it accessible for everybody, but some people focus just on accessibility. So basically, both are approaches to design that make it easier for all to use. So if you look at this image, you'll see that it's a ramp, but it's also stairs. So it's designed for whoever might need it. I don't know if you can tell the ramp goes up the middle or not. Um, so accessibility, of course, focus on those with disability, whereas universal design is broader and it's used by all without the need to adapt or special design something. So if you're designing something from scratch from the beginning, again, things like sidewalks with curb cuts, they benefit everybody. An automatic door opener, a handicap stall, those kind of things are universal design. They take into account accessibility, but they really help everybody. So just things to think about. So accessibility, again, a design principle, not an added feature. And again, some of the ways that you can help people with accessibility, of course, is assistive technology. There's no-tech ways, there's low-tech ways, and there's high-tech ways. And again, when we're talking about a website being or technology being robust, that's kind of where is compatible with some of these high-tech devices. Of course, there's things you can have in your library that are no-tech, a magnifying glass, large textbooks, low tech, things like captions, assisted listening devices, video descriptions, and of course the high tech, which is more of what we're headed towards these days, I believe. And again, we can reframe accessibility in terms of what we provide, not what other people lack. And I think that's the focus we should have as librarians. I just love this quote from Ann Gibson. And thinking about the web, um, accessibility is what we provide, not what somebody can't do. Well, that person can't see, so let's provide this for them. No, we provide it for everyone, so everyone can have access. Okay, so a little bit more about accessibility standards, and I'm not going to belabor this a lot, but I just want to point out the things that kind of affect the websites and things that we're looking at. First of all, Section 508 is huge, and we'll look a little bit about that in a minute about how you can test for 508 compatibility. I've got a website that does a fantastic job, and it's just kind of real simple. You just need to look at your results and go from there, and you can put your library website in. So 508 is an amendment to the Rehabilitation Act of 1998, and it says that all members of the public must have equivalent access to information regardless of ability. And then section 1194.22 talks about how web-based internet and intranet information and applications also need to have that. So these are just very big picture. I'm not going to go into every facet of Section 508, but that's the one that we need to pay attention to. So next up, one of the things to think about is the WCAG 2.0. And this is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines from the W3C that we kind of talked a little bit about earlier. And again, those principles of perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And there are 12 guidelines. And they talk about, and I've got a handout on that I can send you, but I just want to summarize very quickly. A is like the very minimum requirements. You're not really meeting people with disabilities, but you're doing a little bit. AA is a level which is mid-range, which is what most people with disabilities need this. And then AAA is the highest, and that would be a case of where your website is kind of white with black, black on white, no pictures, and that's really hard to do and still have design. And so they're not adamant about having AAA, but if you can get to AA, that's a really good level to be at for people with disabilities. And I think the handout is at this website below here. But just to kind of summarize very quickly, what kind of things do I have to have for AA? And so level A is kind of considered beginner, AA is kind of intermediate. So and it's got specific guidelines, but I just want to summarize very quickly. So in summary, for it to meet AA level, live videos have captions. Users have access to audio descriptions for video content. And I don't know if you know this, but Netflix does that. Contrast ratio between text and background is at least 4 to 5 to 1. Text can be resized to 200% without loss of content or function. Don't use images of text. Offer several ways to find pages. Use clear headings and labels. Ensure keyboard focus is visible and clear. Tell users when the language on a page changes. Use menus consistently. Use icons and buttons consistently. Suggest fixes when users make errors, and again, that might be something like a form. Um, and reduce the risk of input errors for sensitive data. So it sounds really simple, right? But there's a lot to making those things happen. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that with you. And when we look at the tools that will run a check for you, those are the things that it's going to check for and look at. Okay, so again, why does it matter? And of course, I don't want to belabor this point, but libraries, again, can provide the world of knowledge either in person at the library or through their website. It can connect people to information and enrich their lives. Um, things like equal access to resources to jobs. Sometimes they come to the library and that's the only place they can get information about applying for a job. They don't have a computer. Equal opportunity, of course, academic freedom. How can they get access to the ideas that they need if they can't access your website or technology or a computer? Um, it's also important. It's the law. There's policies we have to abide by, and of course, technology is our academic medium. It's ways that libraries create things. We create websites and OPACs and research guides. We're on Twitter and Facebook. We do tutorials. We do streaming video, outreach programs. So of course, accessibility is huge for us. There have been some court cases. If you go to ada.gov, you can see a bunch of different library cases, unfortunately. And these cases deal more with with technology and print disability. Berkeley, University of California, in 2013, they did not provide access to school materials for students with print disabilities, and that was settled by the disabilities right advocate. So they, I guess, didn't provide a way for students to get access to print books, which you kind of need to, be able to do in a class. I don't know what the issue was there if they couldn't get electronic books, but there's so many resources out there where people can, take a print book and make it electronic. Anyways, so the University of Montana in 2014, and these are kind of recent. I mean, these are in the last 3 years. The computer was inaccessible to blind students, and their technology and web-based websites. And so they actually settled with the Department of Education, so it was a much bigger case. Also, Penn State had a case in, sorry, that was 2013. And then also a couple public libraries. So they had this great idea, and this is an example where the technology gets ahead of us and people don't consider or test things for people with disabilities. So they had these awesome Nuke tablets that they're e-readers, and I think they've, with the way things have evolved, um, things are better now in the Nook or Nook Kindle, iBooks, different things like that now have the, will read the screen for you. But at the time, they had this device lending program for e-readers, both the Sacramento Public Library and the Philadelphia Free Library. But there was no text-to-speak feature, and they didn't test it. So again, it is this just example of, it's the law that you have to, not just a good idea, but it's also the law. So a couple little bit more things about the law. So Section 504, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. No qualified individual with a disability in the United States shall be excluded from, denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity that receives federal financial assistance. And of course, a lot of libraries receive federal assistance, of course. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act requires federal electronic information technology, that's what EIT stands for, to be accessible for employees and members of the public. And of course, the big one, which is the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. And again, like I said in the beginning, there's a couple of titles that apply specifically to libraries, which is Title II. Again, discrimination in services, programs, and activities provided by state and local government entities. And so, of course, libraries fall under that. Again, Title III of the ADA. Again, access to private colleges and universities, and it requires reasonable accommodations for full participation in programs and activities of the university. So if you can't read your textbook and there's no reasonable accommodation for you, that's a lawsuit because that person is not going to be able to learn. How can they? Um, there's also a report that's from the ARL, the Association of Research Libraries, and it talks about it was a joint task force on services to patrons with print disabilities. And what it asks is that it requires publishers to implement industry best practices and comply with legal requirements for accessibility. It includes language in publisher and vendor contracts to address accessibility requirements. And it also talks about requesting what's called a VPAT, which is a voluntary product accessibility template. And we're going to talk about that in part 2 next month. Hopefully you'll come back. But basically it's documentation of accessibility from vendors, and that forms this VPAT form, and it's used by the federal government in the procurement process. And what it does is it helps make your e-resources more accessible. So just real quick, I'm just going to take a quick break from talking, but I want to ask you a couple questions. So what is accessibility? First of all, what does accessibility look like at your library? Is it in writing somewhere? And then what is the responsibility of the people you work with? Whether it be, and again, I don't know if we're public library, school library, academic library here, but what is the responsibility of your administration? What do you do as far as accessibility in your library? It doesn't have to be a long answer. I'm just curious. And if you don't do anything, there's no judgment here. It may be something you want to think about, and hopefully today will help you kind of get started with your electronic technology. Okay, perfect, Elizabeth. I'm glad they have you, Elizabeth. Wheelchairs, okay. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just reading what you've typed here. And so, just in summary, who benefits from accessible design? People with visual issues, auditory, cognitive learning, physical, speech, everybody. And then again, everybody benefits from accessible design most of the time. Okay, so I'm going to move now to probably what you're most interested in. I just wanted to frame it a little bit before we got here, which is creating accessible web content. And these are some very simple things that you can do to ensure that you're meeting 508, ADA, different things like that. So first of all, again, what's the role of the library? What are some of the things that we do? Of course, we've got the library homepage. We've got the OPAC, LibGuides. We've got handouts that are in print and tutorials that we do. We just a lot of times do library instruction or information literacy. We have programs. A big one is our databases, and that's what we're going to talk a lot more about next time. Our ebooks, e-journals, and then of course sometimes we do videos. We do live streaming where we do workshops online. So the library has a huge role in making things accessible, and have the parts of the library, the things that we do. So the first thing I want to show you is a very quick way. This is homework for you later if you want to try to do this. This is an add-on to Firefox, and what it does is it shows you, you can't hear anything, but it shows you what your page looks like to a screen reader. So I'm going to show you what Swiftland looks like to a screen reader. And there's also, and I'll get to this later, but there's a website for Chrome, and Chrome actually has an add-on where you can actually use it as a screen reader. And I don't demonstrate it here because I have trouble, just me, figuring out how to turn it off. And so I don't want that to take over the presentation, but maybe if I practice with it a little bit more. But there is an add-on, so if you have Chrome in your library, which is a free download, you can actually have a screen reader in your library on your computers. So just something to think about. I didn't know if you had heard about that. Okay, so let me just share my screen real quick. I'm going to show you what Swiftland looks like to a screen reader, and it can also help you as far as when you look at your website. What is when somebody has a screen reader? What are they hearing? What are they seeing? Not seeing, hearing when they look at our site. So just one second. So this may take a second. I thought Firefox was open. Sorry. Oh, great. Of course, running an update. Um, So just one second, because I have to show you in Firefox because it's a Firefox add-on, but if it doesn't come up right really, really quickly, then we will move on. Sorry about that. I'm not gonna go to, okay, well here's the Florida Electronic Library. So if that one comes up, we'll see if I can, okay, so here's the Florida Electronic Library. And hopefully it's very simple. You can see Florida Electronic Library is loading. So if I right click, and you'll see down here it says View Fangs. So I've already installed it on my Firefox as an add-on. This is what it looks like to a screen reader when the screen reader picks it up. So you can see what it's actually not a bad site here because it's got succinct headings. And so they must have done some testing because it looks pretty decent to me. So I just want to show you that's a way you can quickly look at your site to see if and it even tells you about, here's a helpful tint. You'll be asked to enter your library card. So again, that speaks back to those POUR aspects of the WC3. So just kind of to give you an idea. So I'm going to stop sharing. Give me just a second. I'll be right back with you. Has anybody ever used Fangs before? Okay, well again, it's free. It's something very quickly you can use to look. Um, these you probably know when you're looking at images, be sure to use the alt text field and make it something people can understand. Coke.gif if you give it the name of the image, or you give it a web link, which is where the path of the image is. Those are not great. That's pretty simple stuff. But you'd be amazed how many websites just forget, just don't do it. So for instance, this one is the 19th century lithograph of prominent abolitionists and office holders. And you don't have to go to that extreme, but that's a pretty good description. So if you can have something that really, if you take a little bit of time, you know, um, it can really make a difference to somebody who only has access via a screen reader. Okay, so again, just in your when you're looking at links, you want to call it what it is. Call a spade, as my mom used to say. So if it's a tutorial, just call it tutorials. Don't make it click here or a website, because people nowadays too, people are very suspicious about clicking on anything because they're not sure what it is. So if you aren't consistent with what you name things, people are not going to click on it, and you've basically lost them as a user. And that's for everybody, not just people with disabilities. With multimedia, of course, how many times have you gone to a YouTube video and with YouTube you can actually upload your own um, transcript. You don't have to use YouTube's, and YouTube has gotten a lot better. But of course, this is multimedia and this is captioned. Here, protesters occupied sites if Gaddafi buzz macro, and I'm sure it's talking about the oh gosh, what's the right word? I can't even pronounce it. But that's not what it's talking about. So again, thinking about multimedia that you have and making it personable to your what you're actually saying, kind of thing. And then another thing too is adjustable size and contrast. If that's something you can do, if you can't do it on your website, again, if somebody has a screen reader, that might be fine. There are a lot of things just built into the computer, which is why I thought that you could actually do things with your site. But again, let me double check on that, make sure I'm not wrong. But again, the font size and color should be adjustable. And again, I think there's things you can do within your browser. I know with font size you definitely can. With color, I would have to double check on that. I thought you could. Again, you want to think about when you're navigating your site, skip repetitive navigation links. So you don't want to have catalog one place and then catalog another because people don't know which one to click on. Not just people with disabilities, but regular people. A logical order of headings and a sequence of content. It's ordered. It's not just headings to look pretty. And I know that's hard for us because as libraries we want to entice people to click on things and we want to make it pretty. But again, make sure that it's not repetitive and it's logical. And we're pretty good at things that are logical, I believe. Again, with forms, you want to be careful because with forms you can have labels and the screen reader can read that. So when you name things, you want it to be unique and informative. And the other thing about forms is if you can provide something that tells people, hey, you made an error, and the form just doesn't sit there and do nothing. And I've had those on my phone. It'll appear up in red in tiny little print that you've done something wrong, like forgotten your zip code or something. But if you have something that's helpful like that, it can help teach your users that, hey, you need to do one other thing. They can go with their screen reader and do that. And you can also, if it takes them a long time, if they're using a screen reader, you may want to think about if a form has a time limit to extend it from timing out. Okay, so there's a couple of sites that I want to mention. This WebAIM is fantastic. It's got a lot of free tools. I believe it's sponsored by the W3C. I double check that, make sure I'm not confusing myself. So I want to show you that in just a second, but it's got a multitude of resources. It's got the two checklists for 508 and for the WCAG, which are those 12 um, you know, checklist things that were A, double A, triple A that you're trying to meet for your website or your electronic resources. I'll show you those in a second, but I just want to mention those two sites. If you're looking at contrast, remember one of the elements was that you needed to have a certain ratio of contrast of color. This will actually check the color um, for your website, and you can put that in. Um, there's a screen reader simulator, which is Fangs. Chromevox is the one I was telling you about that will actually do screen reading for you. It's free. It's just an add-on to Chrome. And I think you just have to practice with it a little bit and know how to turn it off. But I tried it and I was really amazed that I didn't have to do anything other than install it into Chrome as an add-on, and it worked beautifully. So it's a really great way to test your site to see what people are actually hearing when they go to your website. And it's difficult to use a screen reader, I think, especially if you're already sighted. Maybe if you're not and you've never had sight, it may be something you're more used to. But when you can see it and you're hearing it, it's a little bit difficult. So I encourage you to try it just to kind of get the experience again of what it's like to use a screen reader. Of course, on our phone, on our iPads, we've got VoiceOver, which is fantastic, and that's a huge help. I feel like Apple has done so much for people with disabilities in terms of accessibility inclusion features on those devices. I think it's fantastic. Okay, and also if you do tabbing in Internet Explorer and Chrome, that'll show you kind of what comes up on a screen reader because what's tabbed to is going to be what the links are. And then one of the things I want to show you is this wave tool very quickly. And there's also built into Google, it's an add-on. There's an accessibility developer tool, and I'll show you that real quick. And then there's Cynthia Says, and these are all ones that will check your HTML according to 508 or the W3C. Um, Before I do that, though, there is, and this is something you can go back to, there is a before and after demonstration. So this takes, if you're looking at perhaps doing your website, it takes your website and shows you kind of a before and after, and it shows you what was wrong and what was fixed. So it's kind of a neat thing to look at as in terms of accessibility. Okay, so I'm going to show you very quickly. We don't have a lot of time left. So I just want to show you very quickly these couple of things, and we're about finished with what I wanted to kind of show you today and share with you today. So very quickly, so the first thing I want to share with you, and this is in Chrome. It's just easier for me in Chrome. This is So this is the before and after demonstration, and you can show annotations right here, and it will show you, come up. So this was their website before, and it can kind of show you image without any text, different things like that. And then if we go back, this is just very quickly. I'd love it if you guys had more time to look at this. If you look at this is the accessible version. So this is after, and each one has a report. So if you're trying to kind of show an example of what you might do, so this is what they did after, and again, you can show the annotations, picture with text alternatives, links highlighted when they receive focus, so different things like that. So it's just kind of a neat thing to look at. Now the web aim site that I mentioned earlier, if you want to test a site with Wave, and we'll do that in a second, you can also look, here are the checklists. Use a checklist for the 2.0 or the section 508. And you can it just takes you through a couple of things here. Test with a screen reader, 2 or 3 things here that you can look at. Very simple. So if you want to test with Wave, right here, and let's take this Yvette's Bridal Shop. I'm just going to copy the link just so you can get an idea. How easy this is for you to do to check your website. Okay, you just click on the button. Very simple. Okay, and it's going to tell you on this side here everything that could possibly be wrong with the page. Eventually, it's still loading. Okay, so you can see. Sorry about that. Okay, so you can see it tells you the errors, and if you expand it, it'll tell you what's wrong. You know, a lot of the things that are wrong with this page here. Um, so 6 errors, and it points them out to you right there. Um, anyway, so you can kind of look at that. The next thing I want to show you very quickly is the Cynthia Says, and this actually goes into a little bit more detail. So you can test your site, and you can choose, if you look here, you can choose section 508, and here you can actually, it's hard to see, I know. Sure. Okay, so you can choose section 508, or you can test your website against the AA standards that we talked a little bit about earlier. I'm just going to leave on section 508. Just type in your address. Give me a second, sorry. There's my address. And then if we just do Swiftland, okay, so I've done Swiftland before. This one takes a little bit of time, and you just click on I agree to the terms and conditions, test your site. So I'm going to let it work for a second, and very quickly I'm going to show you the Google website developer. So give me just just a second because I'm going to let this run. It's still running. It's over here under, if you do the three dots on Google, I'm sorry, on Chrome, and you do more tools, and you look over here and it says developer tools. It'll take a second to come up. And this is actually pretty advanced, the Google developer tools, because it will go line by line. Okay, so here we go. So here, and again, you just kind of have to know what you're looking for. But if you do, click on the arrow here. Sorry, not that one. If you do, give me just a second. I'm sorry, um, accessibility properties here. And so there's not much here because we're looking at this site here, but you can look at your website. It's just an add-on to Chrome in the developer where you can look at accessibility, and a lot of times it will list things there that you can look at. Sorry, that wasn't a very good example, but again, you can look at your site. Have any of you guys, while we're waiting for this to come up, have you used Wave or Cynthia Says or the Google developer application? Is it something you think you guys would find useful? Okay, and you should, again, Joyce, you should get a copy of this presentation, actually the PowerPoint that Erin's going to send you. Um, and I've also got a handout on captioning. This doesn't seem to be responding quickly, so there's just a couple other things I wanted to show you before we close. And I don't want to run too much over because I want you to be able to ask questions. But there's also things you can do within your documents and your PDFs that are very simple. And I just want to show you that. That'll literally take like a minute. So give me just one second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But what this does is it runs down and it tells you everything that you're doing or not doing to meet 508. And it would do the same thing with the double A. So if it comes back in time, we'll do it. But I just want to show you in Microsoft Word, you can actually make your documents that you create in Microsoft Word more accessible. And this is real important because you may have a handout that's online or instructions for getting a library catalog. Maybe you've done a Word doc instead. So what you can do is you click on File, and you want to look at check where it says Inspect Document, check for issues, and check accessibility. So for this document over on the right hand side, it's going to tell me all of my errors that I have. So for instance, and then if you look here, say for instance it says unclear hyperlink text, and I click on it, it's going to tell me how to fix it down here. Sorry. So, so it's telling me to fix things, and usually if you scroll down, so if I click on this one, it tells me why I should fix it, and it tells me how to fix it. And if it's an image, it tells you how to fix the image. So it just makes your documents a little bit more accessible, again, for somebody with a screen reader type thing. And then one other thing I'll show you very quickly. If you wanted to save this as a PDF, so we're going to click on Save As, and just wherever you want to save it. When you save it as a PDF, which is an option down here, this will be probably the last thing we do, PDF, you'll see there's a button over here that says Options. If I click on Options, there's a couple things I want to do here. I want to click on document structure tags for accessibility. So that means when it goes from a Word document to a PDF, you're going to be able to use a screen reader with the PDF. It's not just a static, kind of like screen capture picture of your PDF. And then you also want to do the bitmap text when fonts may not be embedded. And then you just click on OK, and then you save it, and then it has a shot at being recognizable for people with disabilities. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our screen. Give me just 1 second. Actually, just one second. I'll just check very quickly. Okay, Cynthia says it's not, for some reason, is slow today. It was very quick last night. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Let me stop sharing my screen because we're out of time. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Okay, so for homework, try Cynthia Says, and you can, or Wave, and you guys can see if, again, what's going on with your website. And there's very simple things you can fix that aren't hugely technical, that are really add to your site and add to your, universal accessibility for it. So again, when you're looking at documents and multimedia, use tables wisely. Tables are really hard for screen readers to read sometimes. Again, meaningful hypertext. Again, export to accessible PDF. Check the accessibility feature. And this is just a quick screenshot of what we did with Word here. Check accessibility. And again, it tells you how to fix it. And then again, saving as, and that's what we did. We used Microsoft Word to do it. And then also if you're saving a Word document to PDF, which I do all the time, it's just very simple to make it more accessible. This just reviews that for you. And then I can't demonstrate this because I don't have the full Adobe at home, but if you've scanned something or you have a Word document that does not have, that it has not scanned it to OCR, within the full Adobe you can open a document, you can go to your tools, and then you can ask it, and this just kind of walks you through how you can make it OCR. And then with multimedia caption, I've got a handout that Erin's going to send you that talks about things you can do to make your multimedia caption better. And again, it's not just a problem in libraries, it's kind of a problem everywhere. So there's some strategies for captioning locally created resources. Again, you can prioritize the captioning of new resources. And again, you can prioritize the ones that might be used long term. And the captioning tools, of course, Camtasia, YouTube, DocSoft, student workers, of course, if you got those, and volunteers. And of course, with the iPhone, you can do a lot more than you used to be able to. And that's it. Any questions? I'm sorry, we went a little bit over. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And again, I will check on the contrast issue. And I hope that you'll come back for part 2. Again, that's going to focus more on your databases and how you might plan, have an implementation plan for your electronic resources. So a little bit of both for next time. And so hopefully you'll come
All
back.
right. Well, thank you,
And
Dr. Rollins, for a wonderful webinar.
I'll
Attendees,
be
if you
quicker on
enjoyed
that
this
one.
webinar, please
Little
join
bit
us
over.
on
Sorry
November
about that.
21st for part 2. As always, we encourage you to look at the upcoming webinars and workshops in months ahead, and hope you're all able to join us for future training opportunities. Be sure to keep checking the Swiftland CE calendar, the Swiftland Facebook page, or look for your message from the various listservs. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a terrific